Can you ever really trust again after a drunken mistake? I've been married to my wife, Kate, for 4 years now, and we've been together for 9. Honestly, our relationship has always felt like something out of a dream, full of love, support, and understanding. We've built something solid together, with great communication and hardly any arguments. Even in the bedroom, things have only gotten better as the years went by. From the very beginning, though, we agreed on one thing. Cheating would be a deal breaker. No second chances. Last weekend, Kate went back to her hometown to visit her family, which was nothing unusual for us. She'd done this a few times before, and it always seemed like a nice little break for her. Before she left Friday night, we had a minor disagreement about keeping the house tidy. It wasn't a big deal, but it left things feeling a little tense, and our communication on Saturday was more limited than usual. I knew she was planning to go out that evening to meet some friends at a bar, but I didn't give it much thought. Why would I? I trusted her completely. She'd never given me a reason to doubt her. Before I went to bed that night, I sent her a quick text saying, "Hope you had a nice night," and didn't think much more about it. When I woke up Sunday morning, there was a missed call from Kate at 4 a.m. My stomach dropped a little, not because I was suspicious, but because I was worried something might have happened. I immediately called her back, but there was no answer. I tried again a few hours later, still no response. By now, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. It wasn't like her to be this unresponsive. Finally, about an hour after my last attempt, she sent me a short message, "I'm fine. Driving back soon." The words didn't ease my worry. If anything, they only made me feel more unsettled. Kate came home late Sunday afternoon, and the moment I saw her, I knew something was deeply wrong. She looked completely wrecked. Her face was puffy, her eyes red and swollen, and she wasn't wearing any makeup, which was unusual for her. It was like I was looking at a hollowed-out version of the woman I loved, a shell of her usual vibrant self. When she walked in, I instinctively moved toward her to give her a hug, but she pulled away, stiff and distant. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. She barely spoke, and her whole body language screamed guilt and despair. I tried not to panic and focused on getting her to open up. I guided her to the couch, made her a cup of tea, and sat down beside her. I spoke softly, gently encouraging her to tell me what was wrong. For a moment, I thought she might not say anything at all, but then the dam broke. She dissolved into uncontrollable sobs, her entire body shaking as I sat there, helpless, trying to offer some kind of comfort. It felt like an eternity before she could finally get her words out, each one dragging like it physically hurt her to say. Piece by piece, between shaky breaths and tears, she admitted the unthinkable. The night before, after leaving the bar, she had slept with someone else. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I don't even know how to describe it. It was as if a switch had been flipped in my brain, cutting me off from everything around me. Her voice became distant, muffled, like I was underwater. My hands were trembling, my chest felt like it was about to cave in, and the world suddenly felt too small to contain my rage, my heartbreak, my disbelief. Without saying a word, I stood up and grabbed my car keys. I couldn't be in that house. Not with her. Not with the truth of what she just told me hanging in the air like a noose. I drove aimlessly for a while. The engines hummed, the only thing breaking the silence. Eventually, I ended up at a park, and I got out of the car, needing to move, to breathe, to do anything but think about what I just heard. I walked around the park for about an hour, barely registering my surroundings. My phone was ringing constantly, Kate calling over and over again, but I couldn't face her. Not yet. I turned it off, letting the silence wrap around me like a shield, even though it did nothing to block out the storm raging in my head. When I got home, the weight of what had happened settled over me like a storm cloud. I didn't even look for Kate at first. I just walked straight to the garage, grabbed 2 suitcases, and headed to our bedroom. My hands moved mechanically, pulling clothes from the hangers and tossing shoes into the cases without care or thought. Every item I packed felt like another piece of our life together that was now ruined. Once the suitcases were full, I dragged them to the front door, each step feeling heavier than the last. That's when I noticed Kate in the living room, lying on the floor in a crumpled heap. She was curled into a ball, sobbing so hard that it sounded like she could barely catch her breath. It didn't move me. It didn't even make me pause. I pulled out my phone and called her best friend, who lived nearby. "Kate needs a place to stay," I said flatly. "Can you come pick her up? She'll explain everything to you later." When I hung up, I told Kate that her friend was coming to get her and that I was leaving for a while. I needed to get out of the house before I said something I couldn't take back. But as I tried to walk past her, she grabbed onto my legs, desperate, begging me not to leave. Her sobs grew louder, more frantic, but I pried her hands off and walked out the door without looking back. By the time I returned an hour later, the house was eerily quiet again. Kate was gone, and so were the suitcases. The next morning, Monday, I woke up with a clearer head but no relief from the emptiness inside. I decided to finally answer one of Kate's countless calls. My voice was cold, detached, as I told her what I needed. "Send me an email detailing everything that happened that night. Every single detail. If you leave anything out, there's no chance of reconciliation." That night, the email arrived. I stared at it for a long time, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. The thought of reading her words, of seeing her excuses, was too much to bear. So, I left it unread, unopened, sitting like a time bomb in my inbox. Since then, I've been keeping myself as busy as possible, working, exercising, and sleeping. It's like I'm running on autopilot, going through the motions of life without feeling anything. Not anger, not sadness, not anything. Just numb. One of her friends showed up at my house the other day, demanding an explanation with an attitude that rubbed me the wrong way immediately. I cut her off and said, "Talk to Kate," before shutting the door in her face. I didn't have the energy for anything more. In the meantime, I've been speaking with divorce lawyers, moving money into separate accounts, and blocking Kate and all her friends on every platform. It feels methodical, like checking boxes on a list, but there's no satisfaction in it. Just necessity. I don't even recognize myself right now. Every decision I've made since I found out feels like it's coming from some detached part of my brain, while the rest of me is frozen in place, unable to process the enormity of it all. Yesterday, I found a note slipped through the door. It was from Kate. She's asking me to meet her tomorrow, and now I'm stuck in this endless loop of questions, doubts, and indecision. Should I meet her? Would anything she says change the outcome? Is there any point at all in trying to salvage something that feels so completely broken? My head keeps telling me that meeting her is pointless, that nothing she says could undo what's been done. But my heart, the part of me that still remembers the good years, the love we shared, can't help but wonder, what if I'm wrong? What if there's something worth saving? At the same time, I'm not sure I have the strength to sit across from her, to see her face and hear her voice, knowing what she's done. It feels like I'd just be opening the door for more pain, for more lies, for her to try and justify the unjustifiable. Is it normal to feel this detached, this mechanical? It's like I'm a robot going through the motions of life, working, exercising, eating, but there's no life behind it. Everything feels muted, like I'm watching myself from the outside, unable to truly engage with anything. I want to snap out of this, to feel something, anything, other than this hollow emptiness. But how? The betrayal has numbed me in a way I didn't think was possible. I keep going back to what she said when I first confronted her, how she confirmed it was consensual. She admitted she was drunk, but insisted she knew exactly what she was doing. Those words keep echoing in my head, cutting deeper every time I replay them. She made a conscious choice, knowing full well what it would mean for us. So now, I'm left wondering, is there even a path forward? Can trust ever be rebuilt when it's been shattered so completely? Or am I just clinging to the memory of what we were, refusing to face the reality that we're not that anymore? Kate came to the house yesterday, and when I opened the door, I barely recognized her. She looked awful. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, and there was a heaviness about her like she hadn't slept in days. The moment she saw me, she tried to hug me, mumbling a string of apologies through her tears, but I stopped her. I didn't want her touch, didn't want her words. "Let's just sit down and talk," I said, motioning to the couch. Once we were seated, I told Kate I would be recording the conversation. She nodded, agreeing without hesitation. I think she would have agreed to anything at that point if it meant getting me to listen. I began by asking her to explain everything that had happened that night, adding that I hadn't read the email she'd sent. Her hands shook as she folded them in her lap, her voice wavering as she started to recount the night. Kate explained that she had been at the bar with two friends, Sarah and another mutual friend I know and like. She listed off what she had to drink, and I was surprised to hear it wasn't much. A couple of glasses of wine and a cocktail, nothing more than what we'd normally have on a casual dinner date. She admitted that she was only slightly tipsy, not drunk. Then she mentioned Sarah's younger brother, Max, who had come to pick them up around midnight. Max is 27, and it's a running joke in their group that he's had a massive crush on Kate since high school. I've even heard the jokes before, brushed them off as harmless teasing. After the bar, the four of them grabbed some food. Max then drove each of them home until it was just him and Kate left in the car. At this point, Kate claimed she didn't want him to drive the 20 minutes to her parents' house after he'd been working all day, so she decided she'd order an Uber from his apartment instead. She followed him inside, sat on his bed, and tried to arrange a ride, but couldn't get one. That's when, according to Kate, Max suggested she crash in his bed while he took the couch, promising to drive her home in the morning. She said she refused and continued to try ordering an Uber. Then he kissed her, and she kissed him back, and before long, they were having sex. She paused here, her voice breaking as she confirmed again that it was consensual. Afterward, she said she was overcome with guilt, started crying uncontrollably, and insisted Max take her home. She spent another hour crying there, then tried to call me to confess. We had to stop several times during her explanation because she kept breaking down into hysterical sobs. Every time, I sat silently, letting her get it out, but the words coming out of her mouth felt hollow to me. She kept repeating how it was a terrible mistake, how she got caught up in the moment, how she only loves me, but her words felt like static, noise without meaning. When she finally finished, I told her story didn't add up, but it didn't matter. "I'm done," I said. That statement hit her like a punch. She fell apart again, sobbing uncontrollably, trying to convince me we could fix this. But I stayed firm. I told her I was moving forward with divorce preparations, but for the next month, we would separate with no contact. I laid out conditions. We would both remain faithful during this time. We would both get full STD panels. She would tell our mutual friends and her family the truth, that she was unfaithful, and stop letting them believe I had kicked her out over an argument. If she could stick to these conditions, I said I'd be willing to meet again after the month to see if there was any way forward other than divorce. She agreed to all of it with surprising enthusiasm, but one thing she made clear: she didn't expect me to remain faithful to her. I know many will criticize my decision to even entertain the possibility of reconciliation. I understand that, but I need this time, this space, to be absolutely certain. Right now, I'm 99% sure divorce is the only answer, but I need to be 100% sure before I make a decision that will shape the rest of my life. To clarify one last point, I'm not asking Kate to give everyone the full details of what happened, but since she allowed mutual friends and even her family to believe I kicked her out over a petty argument, I asked her to set the record straight. Let them know it's because she was unfaithful. That's it. Nothing more. After reading your comments, I decided to meet with Kate but not read the email. Kate came to the house yesterday, and when I opened the door she looked terrible. She tried to hug me and started mumbling apologies, but I stopped her, and we sat down to talk. I started by telling Kate that I would be recording the audio of the conversation, and she agreed. I then asked her to explain what happened and told her that I haven't read the email she sent. Kate said she had been at the bar with two friends I know and like both of them, and told me what she had to drink. I was surprised at how little she drank because it was the same amount we would normally drink when going for dinner, a few glasses of wine and a cocktail. She admitted she was only slightly tipsy. One of her friends, Sarah, has a younger brother, Max, 27 years old, who came to pick them up around midnight. It's a running joke in their group that Max has had major crush on Kate since high school, and I had heard them joke about this. The four of them went to get some food and Max then dropped each one off until it was just him and Kate. Kate said she didn't want him to drive the 20 minutes to her parents' place after working all day, so would just order an Uber from his apartment. She went into his apartment to order the Uber but couldn't get one. Max suggested she should crash in his bed, and he would take the sofa. He would then drop her off in the morning. Kate refused and continued to try to find an Uber. They were sitting on Max's bed and he kissed her. She kissed him back and they ended up having sex. She confirmed again that it was consensual. After that, she broke down crying from guilt and Max took her home. She cried for another hour, then tried to call me to tell me what she had done. We had to stop a number of times because Kate kept breaking down and crying hysterically. She told me it was a huge mistake. She got caught up in the moment. It was terrible. She only loves me, blah blah blah. After she was done, I told her that her story didn't make sense, but it didn't matter at this stage because I was done. This caused another breakdown. I told her I was going to continue with the divorce preparations, but for the next month, we would be separated with no contact. I also told her that we would both remain faithful, would get a full STD panel, and she would tell our mutual friends and family what happened. If she sticks to these conditions, I would be willing to meet again to see if there was any way forward other than divorce. She enthusiastically agreed to this, but made it clear that she did not expect me to stay faithful to her. I know many of you will criticize this decision, but I need to be sure that divorce is the right option after I have had time to process everything that has happened. I am still 99% sure that is where we are heading, but I need to be 100% certain. Just to clarify, because many of you seem to be focusing on this point. I've had mutual friends and my wife's family send me nasty messages, turn up at my house, etc. because according to Kate, I kicked her out over an argument. My request was that Kate tells them it's because she has been unfaithful, not a full rundown of everything that happened.